Good everyone. I hope you guys have an amazing day. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to demonstrate you guys something, and then I'll explain you what I'm trying to do. Okay, so if you look at my screen, right, this is a pretty simple component which is called create contact. If I say Dave, if I say Dave Avira, right, and then if I save it, if I go to the contacts, you got a Dave Avira, right? So it looks pretty simple, right? It's not much complicated. It's just a component on the screen which helps you create a contact. Now you must be wondering, right, what's so special about it, right? I can do that using flows. Yeah, you can do that using flows, right? Because obviously flow, if you wanted to use point and click without writing a piece of a code, you can use code, which is pretty all right. Um, and a lot of things you can do pretty much the same with the flow. But the thing with the flow is that, right? So let's say if you wanted to build a custom looking component, right, where you wanted to hide the different fields, or you wanted to display a different field based on, say, value from integration or from other stuff. Maybe using LWC could be a better option, and or for that matter, if you wanted to use LWC inside the flow, you can still use it, right? So that's one of the thing I wanted to discuss in simple terms, right? That is, if you wanted to create a component which interacts with the Salesforce data, like for in this case, it does the creation part, you can use out-of-box functionality of LWC, which is pretty powerful in my opinion. Um, so yes, like I said, you can do similar stuff using flows, but I wanted to teach you from a LWC perspective because, like I said, you might encounter a scenario where you might decide, hey, flow is not really great because remember one thing, LWC is designed keeping performance into consideration. If you wanted to deal with large volume of data, then you need to consider whether a flow will be a good fit, or you might as well go with the LWC route. That's just one simple tiny example I gave you. So, okay, so what I've done, right, I've used something called um, Lightning Record Form. Okay, so if you wanted to do a creation, so you use the Lightning Record Form, which is so as you can see from on the screen, it's under HTML page, right? So the Lightning Record Form is creates an editable form or display form for a record in simple terms, right? So it accepts the API name, which is the API name of an object you wanted to interact with. So in this case, I've used contact. You might use accounts, or you can use any custom objects that you have in place. The fields which you wanted to display, like in my case, I've displayed only 2 fields. You can display 10 fields if you like. You can display 4 fields if you like. You can display, whatever fields you like. And then the on submit, what happens when you click on submit, and what happens when the error happens. Okay, how do you handle the errors? Because I have to tell you guys that error handling is very important, right? If you don't handle error, then user might get confused what's going on. If you keep on pressing it and you're not seeing anything that's going on the screen, it's not really great, right? So you have to factor the user experience into consideration as well. And then this is the class, right? SLDS grid. So there are different of them. So I use one of it. So and then I'm using Lightning input field to accept the first name, and I'm using um, the last name. Yeah, that's right. And you can use the required or not required. If you don't want user to enter any values, then you can mark it as, you can ignore the required stuff. So that's pretty much from an HTML point of view. It's, as you can see, the code is pretty simple, right? I'm not doing anything fancy here, though you can do a lot of fancy stuff. You can, like I said, you can use in one of the videos I've said, right? You can use CSS to make your component looks pretty. So the whole point of this series is not to create pretty looking a fancy looking interface. That's one of the things you can do that. Um, but just to give you an understanding about the capabilities of LWC, the things you can use, and to leverage, your customization if you're going that route. Okay, now, so this is a pretty simple, as I said, it's a pretty simple HTML. Now go to the contact JavaScript. So as usual, right, you're importing this class from this LWC. Then you're creating this default class. Then this is where I'm defining fields. So if I wanted to add, say, more fields, um, you can do that here as well. Um, so um, and then this handle submit. So I'm preventing a default option here, um, and then I'm actually going to get all the fields which you entered using this one, events.details.field. So it will give me the information about all the fields which are entered. And then I'm using a query selector. So what does a query selector will do that? It will give me the instance of this form on the screen. And then once I have an instance of the form, I can access the submit button on the form. And when I do submit button, I can use the submit button and pass the fields to submit. It will behind the scene, it will do the create operation. So you cannot access Lightning Record Form directly. You need to use the query selector, and the query selector will make sure that you will get the instance of the Lightning Record Form. If you try to access it, it will give you a null pointer exception, something similar. Now, handle error in this case, I'm just logging into a console error. That being said, you can create a toast message. I'll show you how to do that toast message in one of the episodes. So it's always good to create a toast message. What happens when the handle error happens, event happens. So if you wanted to display that information to the user, you should create it. Although I do agree that in some scenarios where you might be dealing with, let's say, lots of API interaction, then it may not be a great option to display everything on the in a toast message. So it might be better to log it to a logger, or you have a custom object which you mark it as error logging customer. Error logging custom object. You can use that to log your errors, or you can use Autobox. There's a Autobox in the sense like a open source Nebula logger you can use, so which is pretty cool. I've used Nebula Logger, and yeah, you can use to log your errors. Or like I said, you can display in the toast message. And yeah, that's all I wanted to talk about in this episode. I mean, I decided to cover this because I realized you guys might get, one off or edge case scenario where you might want to build an LWC component to use uh, to create a Salesforce data. So it's a good option in place. It's good to know how you can do that, because if you are an architect, if you're a developer, you should have a better understanding of the tools you're using, right? So that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this. It's just for the sake of completeness, I would say, and I believe that you should know as a developer, if there's an option out of box functionality provided within LWC to create a component, right, without writing much code. Right. So that's all I wanted to talk about in this episode. We're gonna deal with the data security, lockers, and kind of stuff in the future, right? So we're gonna get there. It's not over yet. I still got a lot of things to cover. So yep. You guys have an amazing Tuesday. Adios.